Welcome to your daily dose of Sunday School, episode 124. This is Ask Anything Wednesday. Why is heaven referred to as the heavenly places? And that's in Ephesians 1 and 2, the heavenly places. It talks about Christ being seated in heavenly places. Well, there are three basic levels to heaven. Genesis 1:1 talks about God creating the heavens and the earth. Psalm 19:1 talks about the heavens declare the glory of God, and then he mentions the sky and night and day. And 2 Corinthians 12:2, Paul talks about being taken up into paradise, and he calls that the third heaven. So what are basically the layers of heaven, the heavens? We have the atmosphere that we see during the day. And we have outer space, which we see the stars at night, and the moon. Of course, the sun's further away than the moon, but whatever. So we have the atmosphere, outer space, and then we have God's dwelling place, the third heaven, where Paul went, and he was in paradise. He doesn't know if he was in the body or out of the body, what he says there. But then Ephesians 2:6 also sounds like he seated us with him in heavenly places. It sounds like he's talking about the third heaven already, but then places. Why didn't he just say seated with him in heaven? He's not seated in the atmosphere. He's not seated in outer space, at least in the way we would think about outer space. I don't know. But he's seated with him in heavenly places. Now, there's all these people who have tried to diagram heaven, have come up with levels of heaven and things, talking about the third heaven. So there are Christian traditions talking about 7 layers of heaven, in which case I would assume you're probably splitting up the third heaven into multiple places, but we don't have that information. There's a non-scriptural book of Enoch that talks about 10 layers of heaven. I think Enoch goes through them all. So we don't want to validate those, but there do appear to be heavenly, talking about the third heaven, heavenly places. And so in Job 1:6, we have the angels coming to appear before God. Well, where were the angels before then? They were in some other heavenly place, one would assume. And so when it talks about heavenly places in Ephesians, I think it probably has in mind not just God's throne room, but wherever the different angels are in their levels of authority. Remember that Hebrews says that God has made man for a little while lower than the angels. One of the amazing things about the gospel, about Christ ascending, the God-man ascending to the highest place, is that the angels who are intended to serve us when humankind was in its infancy, the angels are then superseded by Christ, by the God-man, and so that we are exalted even above the angels. We become heirs, they don't become heirs. And so I think what has in mind in heavenly places is actually thinking about Christ not just in heaven with the angels, but being in heaven above the angels. And we see that in Ephesians 1, I think, where it says, talking about God raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places, far above all rule and authority and power and dominion, and above every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in the one to come. So often those rule, authority, and power is not just pointing to human rule, but also angelic rule, which has to do with both angels and demons and their power on the earth before Christ came. And The point being that he's not just with them in heaven, he's actually above them. So there's more than one place. That's at least what I think it's referring to. But again, there's no need to delve into those Christian traditions or extra biblical writings to try to figure out, well, what are the heavenly places? Let me diagram them. That's not helpful. The Bible doesn't do that for us. Just understand that there is some sort of hierarchy in heaven, and Jesus is the highest place you can be.